Olsen, someone that I've worked with several times, and we're going to talk about intimacy in theater, why training in it is useful, some of the things that can go horribly wrong, and why you've decided to go through the types of theater that you do. So, what brought you to our weird theater stuff?
Edinburgh, and thinking that I was okay with giving up theater and doing Girl Gone and realizing I wasn't, especially when there's so many other kinds of theater out there that you don't really get to experience in high school.
So Girl Gone was your first alternative theater?
Yes, it was.
First seeing, first being involved with?
Both. I definitely wasn't going to as many shows as someone who claimed to be into theater should have. And I definitely hadn't been involved in anything like that. The only straight plays I've been involved in were kids shows, so it's very different.
So what made you decide to audition for it then if you've never even seen a type of theater like that?
A good question. I ask myself often. Well, I read the description, and it said topless dancers, and I just had never been part of something where it was always high school stuff and safe stuff. It was always, we'll censor this just in case anybody misconstrues it, instead of not censoring stuff that's a part of our lives. So I thought it was really cool to do something like that. I really wanted to be a part of something like that. I didn't even know too much of the plot. It was honestly the nudity and the getting to perform nude and uncensored was really exciting.
Now you say perform nude, but it really wasn't that.
No, it wasn't that bad. But I hadn't even done something where it was swimsuits or anything like that. So just topless was new and interesting for me.
And with that, the topless, not everyone got topless.
No, it was, which was also cool because I don't know, I think going into it, I assumed that a lot of people who would audition were going to be the kind of people who wanted to push themselves. And I still think that that's how everybody was for the most part. But it was cool that on the audition sheet it was circle if you're actually okay with being nude. And I know that only myself and 2 other girls were actually saying they were comfortable with it during auditions. But it was cool because it was we slowly started wearing less and less clothes during rehearsals, and the environment was just comfortable enough that those people who said they wanted to try to do it topless actually were comfortable with it, and a lot of other people were comfortable with getting pretty darn close to being topless.
So, since you've done theater before and after that, what are some of the differences that you noticed with how intimacy and the body was approached with that show compared to other places?
Well, I noticed that with Laugh Riot, it was always, we never didn't talk about any of that stuff. It was always these are the costume ideas, if you're comfortable, these are ideas that we do as far as choreographing more intimate moments. But it was always talked about so much, and it, we always discussed the ability to change it any night that someone was uncomfortable. And I just noticed that at other places, people don't talk about it at all. It's here's the day that we're all gonna start kissing, hugging, and holding hands and stuff, and here's the day when you're gonna strip down this far, instead of sort of working up to it, talking through it, talking about where the comfort levels are. But also, it's not just between director and actor. Actors don't really talk about what they're comfortable with, and I think part of that is should talk about that stuff because some people could be uncomfortable or could suddenly get uncomfortable. And I don't think there's enough people teaching younger actors how to do that.
Well, and intimacy in and of itself is weird. Like, most of us aren't comfortable approaching people with that in our own personal lives. So to expect people to be comfortable with that with actors and other people on stage that they may have met the week before at auditions is really tricky, and it's really uncomfortable for everyone involved. And that's something that I've seen in lots of places. Like it's not calling anyone out on any behavior. That's just the way it always was. It's the way it was when I was in school. It was the way it was at most theaters that I've worked with. And that you don't talk about that part, and you just kind of hope that by the time it's ready to stage that there's a connection or a relationship there, that they trust each other. But I know as a director, one of the things that I'm always awkward with, and I was really awkward with at first, was you don't want to spend too much time on those scenes, because then that's really creepy. But you also don't want to spend too little time on those scenes, because then that gets really uncomfortable. So trying to figure out how to approach it without making it seem like you're approaching it too early and too often.
Yeah.
Did that approach work for you?
Definitely. I think that because that was my re-invitation into theater, that I expect that from other places now too. And because of that, it's like looking at other places and seeing, I don't know, it always seems so easy for you. Like you always knew what you were doing, and then watching other people struggle to do those parts, because it is hard, it is awkward, it is like this intimacy training, safer approach is new to like so many people. Like it's so frustrating.
That's part of the reason why I want to do these videos and why I want to do choreography and consultation, is to get people used to having these discussions and to realize that you can talk about these things with actors and it will be okay, and that you can change blocking and it will be okay, and you can give actors agency and the show won't suffer. And actors can feel comfortable saying, no, I am uncomfortable with this. And you as a production team can figure out what to do there. You've worked with me on several shows. What have you noticed are beneficial approaches to, even beyond just nudity, but the uncomfortable scenes? Like what works? If you were going to take something away from it to teach other people, what are some of the things that you would take away?
Okay. Communication, obviously, I think was the most important. I liked that the uncomfortable parts were blocked like choreography, like a scientific approach almost, so that it took away all the awkward bits, and it was like choreographing a fight scene. So it was like step by step and doing it slowly, and so that like doing it slowly too, like makes you know which parts that you're more comfortable with, and like it gives you time to be like, am I okay with this? And like it gives you time to say no if you don't think that you can do those parts, if you're not comfortable with that. And I think honestly comfort exercises are like the best thing ever. Like I wish that was a college class. It was just comfort exercises and like choreographing those moments like fight choreography, so that it doesn't become like an awkward thing that people like freak out about so much.
Well, you mentioned just now how it's very choreographed and it's very settled. that's very different from the way I block the rest of the show altogether.
Yes, which is, so it's really funny to go from like the rest of the show being whatever feels comfortable with you, but like any of those moments are like really choreographed, and I think that's how it should be. It shouldn't just be like in the moment, what do you feel like doing with those parts, because like that's how bad things happen. That's how sexual harassment and assault happens.
And it's why I struggle so much with this and figuring out how to get people to connect with it. That if I, who don't like to have rigid blocking, can come up with it and go, okay, for these parts we have to do that. We can adjust later, but it's never going to be something that a character just does something in the fly.
Mm-hmm.
And even with the comfort exercises, if you are exploring and trying to figure out boundaries, those comfort exercises at the beginning let you know where that exploration ends.
Mm-hmm.
That if you're going to be in those moments on stage, those boundaries have been established so that if you're going to touch somebody, even if you're doing it in the moment because you feel like you need to touch them, you know where you can and can't for that day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's the way I remember explaining it to somebody was like, because like in the moment, if you were angry at someone, like on stage, like at the end of Killer Joe, if there wasn't like a choreographed hit, you wouldn't just like in the moment. I felt like punching him because that's assaulting someone, and I think that like on stage intimacy should be thought of in a similar way, even though it's like a different emotion. You wouldn't act out emotionally in anger, so you shouldn't act out emotionally that way because you would possibly be hurting somebody else.
Okay, so now we've talked kind of about the importance of intimacy, choreography, and creating a set of terminology and exercises to make this less awkward and uncomfortable for everyone. What keeps bringing you back to this?
Well, after Girl Gone, it was definitely, because that was a very feminist show, and while I was doing it, at first it was just the new experience, broadening my horizons, trying to push my comfort levels and stuff like that. But after doing that show, it became about like, I liked being nude, partially nude on stage, because I felt like that whole show was about like female empowerment. And then when we did Trojan Women, that was another show where it's like a strong female character like took clothes off, and it was, I liked that it wasn't just doing edgy theater for the sake of doing edgy theater and choreographing intimate scenes and exploring sexuality and nudity just for the sake of it. But even though I think exploring sexuality and nudity is important, it was exploring those things for reasons that I think have value to people my age, and especially women my age. I think it's really hard to be a girl sometimes, and to be able to talk about your own sexuality and your own body in like a safe place and show other people that they can too. And that's why, for the most part, why I kept coming back, because a lot of the shows that I kept coming back to were about those similar themes.
And for both Girl Gone and Trojan Women, the entire cast, every time that we discussed it, it was always a, you never have to go beyond still being clothed.
Mm-hmm.
Like you could, even for Girl Gone, which every character in it was either a topless dancer or somehow tangentially related to topless dancing, everyone had the option to still stay clothed. And I think that to me is what was important to get through to the entire cast, is that it was never, I never wanted you all to feel pressured into having to be nude on stage. That it was a choice that if you wanted to make, you could, but it wasn't going to change the show. Like, I never wanted you to feel, well, if you don't take your clothes off, we're going to have to recast it, or it's going to change my artistic vision. It's just going to be a different moment there.
Yeah. And I think that's what took those shows from just being like entertainment to like actual interesting, important theater. Because if you're doing a show that's about like female empowerment, then you're like, well, you got to take your clothes off, or you can't be cast. Then you're literally taking away a woman's power. And I feel like a lot of the shows I've been a part of that have preached certain ideas have sort of pressured people in such a way that like you're already taking away from those ideas. Like if it's not something you actually believe in, why are you doing it?
So you went from those two shows, and I told you right from the get-go that you terrified me. Because usually people have that one show that they do with me where they kind of warm up and realize that it's not sketchy and it's not skeezy and that I really do mean everything that I say. And you jumped right into it. And you keep challenging me to go progressively darker. What makes you feel so safe?
I don't know. It just always felt safe. From the first rehearsal where we did comfort exercises, like, I was like, why isn't everybody doing this? And I don't know. Like I said, you always talked everything through, and there was this community of really seemingly strong women who like also were really good at communicating and like trusted you, and the whole space was just really safe. And that was, you said safe space all the time, and at first I was like, safe space, because that's like has a negative connotation because of the internet. But when I saw what you actually meant when you said safe space, I was like, this is necessary, and I always felt that it was safe.
All right, well, I think that covers probably at least a couple weeks of videos. We'll be back to start showing you guys how to do some of these comfort exercises in a couple weeks. And if you have any questions, feel free to email me. The link will be at the bottom of this page. Thanks a lot.